you, Stephen. Welcome everyone to our CD1 and CD3 candidate forum. We really appreciate your attendance here. What we're going to do is Stephen, if you can kick us off, and we can do panelist introductions before we dive into questions. You are muted, Stephen.
Right, there you go. I was going to say, if Christopher wants to go, I guess he's sort of the top row here in my screen.
Awesome. How much time do I have for intros? Keep it quick.
Keep it brief.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Christopher Marte. I'm running for City Council District 1. I was born and raised on the Lower East Side. My parents immigrated here from the Dominican Republic. My dad was a bodega owner. My mom was a garment worker. Growing up in this neighborhood, I've seen so many changes to our community, whether it's gentrification, which in turn creates displacement, or the abuse of workers' rights. And that's what really got me involved to run for City Council in 2017, where we ran a grassroots campaign and inspired a lot of people in this district to turn out and push back on the status quo. Sadly, we lost by 222 votes, but even though we lost, we never stopped working. In the past 3 years, we fought against eviction on 85 Bowery Street. We fought against the 4 luxury towers that are planned in the 2 richest neighborhoods, and we stopped the mega jail that the mayor proposed in Chinatown. Imagine all these achievements without being the city council member. Just imagine how we could transform our neighborhood and our streets with someone that's willing to do the work and have community input alongside with them to make sure we get it done. I'm excited about this forum. I've been a biker my whole life. And so I want to thank you guys for hosting this.
Thank you. Jenny, would you like to speak now?
Sure, thank you. Hi, I'm Jenny Low. I'm running for City Council in District 1. I have been a lifelong resident of Lower Manhattan, and I've spent over 3 decades fighting for folks in Lower Manhattan. I came to this country when I was 12 and not even knowing the alphabets, and through the great education that I got from the New York City Public School, I was able to learn English and work in the evenings and on weekends in a coffee shop in Chinatown. Since then, I have been served as a nonprofit leader, the director of community engagement division for the city council, and I elected as the first and still only Asian American woman as district leader in New York City in Manhattan. I have been working as a community banker for 15 years at JP Morgan Chase, and also spent 10 years making grants from JP Morgan Chase Foundation to support low-income families and students, enrichment programs for low-income schools and affordable housing and workforce development. Now that I've seen the pandemic that has devastated our district and our city, I'm ready to jump off the sideline, get on and jump into helping the city in a different way. Because of my experience and my proven track record, many people have been asking me to run for years. I have the support of Congress members, all the 3 Congress members in District 1, Congress member Nydia Velasquez, Calvin Maloney, and Gerald Nadler, and many other elected officials, and also support from unions like UFT, HTC, and DC 37, and many others. I will be one of the very few council members who do not need any training on day 1. So I would be able to hit the ground running and help fight for recovery for working families and for equitable recovery in the District 1. And that's why I'm running for City Council. Thank you.
Thank you. Danny, you're next on my screen. Mute it.
Good call. Appreciate that, Stephen. All right. First, thank you, Transportation Alternatives, for hosting this forum. These are one of the issues that I really like to dive into, so I'm definitely looking forward to this particular forum. First question that I'm often asked when I'm speaking to voters out in the district is why I'm in this race. And I tell them it's because of the George Floyd murder. That is what inspired me to get into this race. I looked at the candidates that were currently announced, And I recognize that not only were substantive solutions missing from actually dealing with the generational inequities that have been pulled to the forefront in 2020, but that they were often spitting these empty platitudes, not really trying to solve our problems. And for me, the underlying theme that really gets to the heart of the problem has been the lack inability for a lot of these individuals to achieve their American dream. And that's why I developed the American Dream Plan, something that intersects housing, economy, and education. So we can fulfill a lot of these problems that we've been facing, and we have just kicked the can down the road. Now, the top line issue that I actually created 9 months ago, 9 months prior to Transportation Alternatives releasing a 25 by 25 plan, was superblocks. That is a #1 item on my economic plan, and it's for citizens and pedestrians to reclaim the streets. One thing that we have recognized in the last 10 years is that pedestrian deaths, either through car, walking, or cycling, has actually remained flat. But there's some differences between statistics. When it comes to cycling and pedestrian deaths, they've actually increased between 30 to 45% within the last decade. And they've also been disproportionately affected in the minority and also elderly communities. So that's why when I developed my my super box plan, which also coincides with the 25 by 25 plan, is because I recognize all these inequities and all the unsafe measures that have been currently existing within our city structure and our city planning phases, but additionally what we can do better. Now, I encourage everybody to visit my website at dennysalas.com, American Dream. You'll see the substance within my plans, but also look forward to answering all the questions tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Susan, you're next on my box here.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I am a little under the weather, so I hope you guys can hear me. My name is Susan Lee. I'm running for City Council in District 1. I am, excuse me, a lifelong New Yorker. I am a proud product of the New York City public school system, and I actually stayed around for undergrad and graduate school. I went to Barnard College and went to NYU for Wagner School of Public Service. I worked at a law firm as a legal assistant and spearheaded the 9/11 recovery effort down here in Lower Manhattan. And I saw what devastation can do to a community, but how resilient and creative our city can be, where we turned an area in the financial district that was purely a corporate Wall Street structure into a neighborhood friendly, family-friendly neighborhood. I worked most of my adult life for those in need. I am on the board of I was on the board of 2 nonprofits, one Know Me Network that works with anti-human trafficking women, and the second one is Mercy First, which is a human service agency. The reason why I'm running is because you know, I'm tired of the establishment, pay to play politics that's going on in the city, which really inflates excuse me, the government contracts, and it's at the expenses of our taxpayer. And so that is why I'm in the race. I really want to, you know, I really have common sense solutions to a lot of the problems that we have in the city. And I look forward to sharing that with everyone. Thank you, excuse me.
Thank you. Hope you feel better. And Tiffany, last but not least.
Thank you. With the last name ending in W, I'm used to going last. I'm okay with that. Great to be here this evening. Thank you so much for inviting myself, as well as the others within this race to speak to a little bit more about why we're running. So I'm Tiffany Winbush. I am running for City Council District 1 to represent Lower Manhattan. I am a proud resident of the district. I've lived here for the entirety of the time that I've been a New York City resident, which is a little bit over 15 years. I have roots in Louisiana, but New York City is definitely my home. It is the place where I became a partner to my husband, where I became a parent to my 2 little ones, and where I have made lifelong friends that I hope will last and I'll take with me forever. I am running for city council really as an opportunity to be a voice for those people who may not be your traditional people who are involved in politics. I'm a political outsider. I've never held a political position, but that does not mean that I have not been active in my community. When I relocated to New York City, I knew that I wanted to be part of the fabric of Lower Manhattan, and I was appointed to Community Board number 1. While on the community board, I had the great opportunity to serve on the Affordable Housing Committee, where some of the work that we did included identifying residential buildings downtown that had received a tax credit, making a complete list of those and notifying the residents within that building that they may potentially be eligible to pay a lower rental rate. Notifying people of this eventually led to several lawsuits where residents came out on top and they were able to get back an over expenditure of rent payment that they have made. I am also very active in my kids' school. I have their product of public school, so work very closely to ensure that the community, the families within the school have a relationship that works for each and every person. During this time of COVID, I've realized that community is what's going to move us forward. That's collective action. So I have worked with the local green market in my neighborhood so that parents who happen to receive the EBT card who were not using those because they don't necessarily need them can then donate those funds to the green market, which gives food to the local housing developments in District 1. In addition to that, I've also gathered with a number of individuals in our community who are focused on inclusive communities, meaning that everyone is welcome, to roll out a group called Friends of FIDI, where we are just really focusing on the fact that come one, come all, you are welcome to be a part of our community. This is something that I hope to take with me within the city council, focusing on community and leading with empathy. Any decisions that I will make will be made to help the least of us, because when we rise the tide of everyone, everyone really benefits. So I look forward to sharing more about myself throughout the forum. Thank you.
Cool. Well, it's great to meet all of you. It's my first time meeting most of you. So thanks for joining us. As you guys know, I'm the transportation reporter at WNYC and Gothamist. And obviously Transportation Alternatives is hosting this, so it's very, we're gonna jump right into some transit themes. And I think we have about 40 minutes, 45 minutes or so. You have to bear with me. I'm not like a expert forum host, but I do ask a lot of questions. So I'll try to keep it lively and get some back and forth going. It's not just gonna be like, you answer, you answer, you answer. Feel free to, like, you know, respond to each other. So let's just dive right into it. I have a couple of district sort of specific questions and then some more broader transportation related questions. But one topic, I don't know how deeply anyone has looked into the Brooklyn Bridge design competition, but there is a push to redesign it. So I wanted to get your thoughts as candidates. How do you think the city should act on the Brooklyn Bridge design competition? And I guess it'll be somewhat of a free for all, but try not to like shout over each other.
I believe it's a great idea. I think it's a start, and I think it's something we should put on every single bridge. In District 1 right now, we have 3 bridges: Brooklyn Bridge, Manhattan Bridge, and the Williamsburg Bridge. And so, you know, having bike lanes, car lanes that are slowly converted into bike lanes is the step in the right direction and the future of our city. I also think that these lanes should go to protected bike lanes once they get into the city, because that's where we see a lot of these accidents happen, especially off the Manhattan Bridge and the Williamsburg Bridge, when once you turn left onto Delancey, it's almost a danger zone. And so it's making sure that, you know, we fix our bridges for cyclists, but also make sure that the street connects with them and they're protected as well.
So I am eagerly await for the competition to be completed. Having walked through the bridge throughout the years, I know the roadways are so narrow on top that it is very difficult for both the bikers and the pedestrian to walk through the bridge. So I think the key element that I would like to see in the design is that the bike lane is thoroughly secure. It is very difficult, you know, if there's an accident with a vehicle, the bike always loses, right? The biker always loses. So just sheer mass of the car. So I think it would be a good idea for us to have an alternative way for people to come through or go back and forth between Manhattan and Brooklyn, uh, on the bicycle that is not congested with pedestrian as well on the top of the roadway. So um, I'm in favor of that.
And as well, I want to also agree that, converting the Brooklyn Bridge so that it is more suitable for cyclists, more suitable for walkers of the bridge, I think is going to benefit everyone as a whole. I leisurely walk that bridge, and it is very easy for a bicyclist to, run into a walker, and no fault of their own. Just as it was mentioned, those roadways are very narrow. I would like to, point out the simple fact that the less bicycle traffic that we can get off over the bridge will make it more suitable for seniors and more suitable for families who may walk that bridge and are a little bit more leisurely and may not always can be able to see bicyclists come and go. Now, I know that I've also heard from a number of my neighbors and a number of residents in District 1 that removing a lane for automobiles on the bridge will cause backup. The Brooklyn Bridge is already backed up. I would use this as an opportunity to really encourage people to take advantage of our public subway system and other opportunities to get around as well. So the more people that we can push from using cars and vehicles and more to public transportation, that is really going to help overall and also help with health. I know that we'll probably go into this a little bit later, but we know the health impacts that cars can cause on a society, especially when it's a lot of traffic in within a neighborhood. So I'm hopeful to see this outcome result in something positive for everyone all around.
Susan, go ahead. You like?
Oh yeah. Hi. So as a marathoner, I run all over the city. I run along the Hudson River Park. I run to the bridge. I run actually across Brooklyn Bridge and then come back Williamsburg Bridge. So I think that it's a really good idea to have the bike lane move to where the motor vehicles are. And I think that the time is right to do that because we're gonna implement congestion pricing. And that means that hopefully with congestion pricing, motor vehicle into the city will decrease, which will alleviate the backup that Tiffany was just talking about. And then that would free up a lane for bicycles. I mean, I think oftentimes, when I'm running, I can't listen to music or podcasts because I need to be mindful of bikers. And so I think that it's a really good idea. And if you compare it to running, let's say, along the Hudson River, there is a designated protected bike lane. And so it just makes sense to have that facility, have that ready and access for cyclists, as well as runners, pedestrians, and motor vehicles, we need to have less motor vehicle coming into the lower Manhattan area because of congestion.
Since I'm going last, I'm not really going to parrot any of the other talking points that a lot of my other candidates already said. They really touch upon a lot of the main points. Obviously, when we're going through this pedestrianization of kind of our roadways and our bridges and everything else, that's going to come with the community health benefits that we need. For too long, a lot of our working class communities have been exposed to a lot of the air pollution that comes from cars. So increasing access to roadways, everything else, and lessening the traffic is going to increase health outcomes for everybody. What is going to be interesting to see is when Secretary Buttigieg actually fully approves our congestion pricing plan, mainly because as of now, the only thing we can really project to see is that traffic, at least in the lower part of Manhattan, everything below the streets that we've selected, is projected to be around 9 to 13%. Now, how does that 9 to 13% look like? We don't know yet. Or is it going to be more depending on how aggressive we're really going to try to actually restrict and lower the amount of traffic that's going to be going through our roadways. Safety, not the risk of parroting some of the other things that my other fellow candidates said. But yes, actually having actual protected bike lanes. So the fatality rates are actually going down in the city, where they actually stayed flat. They've lessened a little bit when Vision Zero came out by Mayor de Blasio, but now we've been seeing a slight increase since then. So there's a number of things that we need to do. Obviously, coming out of pandemic is going to be huge, especially with public transportation, and hopefully increase in expenditures and investments in those types of transportation alternatives, at the risk of saying the title's name, but those are things that I think are really going to be beneficial as a whole for the entire district. So,
cool. And now just to get like very, very specific for like one street in your district, but a very crucial and congested street and popular street. I'm curious if any of the candidates have any specific things they would do to improve Canal Street to make it more pedestrian friendly and just to make it, you know, a more comfortable place for everyone, tourists and locals, to be.
I'll go first just because I think I ended up going last that time. But that's where my super blocks plan really comes into effect. 10 years ago, the Department of Transportation did a study to create kind of the senior pedestrian focus areas. And they really focus on increasing the safety because of the fatality rate, not only of pedestrians, but seniors as well. And they haven't really focused on the implementation of the study that they created that 10 years ago. So what can we do? Super blocks. Super blocks, for those that are unfamiliar, really does mirror a lot of the 25 by 25 plan that this group came out with at the beginning of this month. But I did write my plan again, June of last year. Just imagine all of a sudden a 4 to 5 block area where car traffic is really relegated to the major thoroughways on the outside. So pedestrians reclaim the streets in the middle. So what you've seen, this is an idea that originated in Barcelona in 2016, and we have 5 years of data to look at, is not only have you seen increased foot activity that's led to increased business activity, but there's been community health outcomes where people are getting to know their neighbors more, but also physical health. So people are not sucking up car fumes, so that particularly matters, not making them more susceptible to, you know, respiratory illnesses like COVID. So there's a number of things where super blocks will become very beneficial, including safety. Now, one of the things that we need to do is also increase spending like signage. Think about when we travel in rural areas across this country, when you're approaching school zones, where you have flashing lights, all this other stuff that's really signaling to car drivers exactly when they're coming into an area where they need to be a little bit more careful. You don't see that in New York City. That is something that we can do, especially when we know that there's a high pedestrian, high foot traffic area. So those are some of the ideas. Super blocks, obviously, increase in signage, but I'll stop there.
I think one of the things, you know, going back to congestion pricing, I think that with congestion pricing, it will alleviate a lot of the traffic on Canal Street. But also, you know, Canal Street is an important thoroughfare in our district. And I think that one of the interesting things that we can look at is perhaps model it like Houston Street, where there is a median in the middle to help pedestrians cross, because sometimes you can't cross at 7, 6, 7, depending on if cars are double parked, but you can't really cross that street as a senior or someone that is disabled at the time that they allotted to cross the street. So I think that perhaps having a median in the middle would be really good. I know that in terms of, you know, cyclists, I think that we need protected bike lanes, but perhaps maybe we should have it at like an adjacent block, north or south of it, because I think that once you put the median in, then you take out a lane already, or 2 perhaps, and then there might not be room for a protected bike lane. So we need to be mindful that, you know, that is an important thoroughfare in our district. So perhaps, you know, for the cyclist, a protected bike lane would be somewhere north or south, a block or 2. But I think that, like I said, you know, with congestion pricing, hopefully it will solve a lot of the safety issues and the congestion on Canal Street.
So we need to look at Canal Street is a big problem. I grew up in Confucius Plaza, which is right underneath Canal Street, and having been a victim of a car accident as a pedestrian, and where I almost died 3 years ago, right at the foot of Manhattan Bridge. I know how difficult, how traffic can go through Canal Street. I agree with Susan. It's a main thoroughfare for Lower Manhattan, for Manhattan period, because of the traffic going from Brooklyn to the tunnel, going to Jersey. So we do need to solve that problem. But as we try to solve that problem, we don't want to have unintended consequences of the streets north and south of it. So it has to be a comprehensive plan. Um, if congestion pricing will reduce the traffic, that's one factor, right? And that's great. So, but we do need to look at a comprehensive planning, and also we need to have full input, real input from the residents of the community along Canal Street, because it is very critical. We elderly, my mom, she can never walk through Canal Street on the Bowery in one traffic light for the pedestrian. So we have to, when we plan this, we have to really have a balanced way of accommodating or planning, so that we keep, the most important thing to me is safety, right? Safety for the people, safety for people who are walking, for people who are biking, and for the people who are in the car too, right? So if we don't take into consideration of people's input, then we would have quite a bit of unintended consequences that they have, like what they have done on other streets, where they just put something in, and or put a, it doesn't work for us without knowing how people locally use the street, right? So
In addition to speaking about how the cars will be regulated on Canal Street and how they will work, I think that we can all confirm that, walking that thoroughfare can be very difficult because there is so much congestion. There's so many people. We know that going forward post-COVID, that we want to use our sidewalks for a lot of the small business to utilize that for cafes and things of that nature, to bring their businesses out onto the sidewalk in order to increase the amount of people who visit. But I think if that is something that we will keep moving forward, we have to think about how those sidewalks are best going to work for pedestrians and for the businesses who will also utilize that. So widening those sidewalks is another way that we could, try to ensure the safety of pedestrians, while also considering how we can have less traffic coming within that area. But the smaller space that we have to commute and go back and forth makes it difficult. People then get pushed out into the street, and that's where the safety issues come from, if people don't have enough suitable space to be safe on the sidewalk as they're walking in that particular community. And so while we are considering ideas on how to ensure that there is less traffic, or if automobiles will continue to come through that area, how it could be more suitable, we also have to keep in mind the pedestrians as well, and how we can ensure that their walking experience along that thoroughfare is enjoyable, so that they can keep coming back again and again.
I think when we look at Canal Street, we also have to look at the streets that go into Canal Street. Right now, the 5th precinct on Elizabeth Street takes up the sidewalk and really abuse their placard privileges. We also see police cars parked in the middle of Canal Street. That shouldn't happen. These streets are made for the public and for people to walk and people to commute, and not for people to park their cars illegally. So once we could do that, we could open up Elizabeth Street so the traffic becomes less congested. Also, with congestion pricing, hopefully there will be less traffic. But we all have to understand that Canal Street will always be busy, because the Holland Tunnel connects to the other 2 bridges, and that's where the main path where cars actually go on. With that said, we need to have protected bike lanes. We need to expand our sidewalks, but we also have to change how we do our drop-offs and delivery. In London, there's a model where they set times of the day to allow for deliveries to happen. We should replicate that, especially on busy streets on Canal. So let's say from 5 a.m. to 8 a.m., there can be drop-offs. From 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., when there's peak pedestrian walking, we eliminate any drop-offs. This will stop the abuse that are happening, especially with UPS, FedEx, and now Amazon taking over our streets, and allow to have more space on the sidewalk and the street so we could walk safely.
Cool. I think almost everybody mentioned congestion pricing, which would be one of the biggest changes to the city, and certainly your district would be heavily impacted by those charges and the reduction in traffic and all the benefits that come with that. But as you guys know, the MTA is in charge of congestion pricing and setting the fee structure and setting the carve outs. While the city will have supposedly one representative, or maybe it's two, at this board that helps decide these things. One of the biggest things that's going to impact your district, you have very little control of. So I'm curious, how will you insert yourself into that conversation and represent your constituents' needs when it comes to congestion pricing, when it's very much out of your district, so to speak, like it's an MTA policy and decision and process.
I believe now we can advocate to make it happen. We have a weak governor, and we all know the governor controls the MTA. And so if you can put pressure on him now, it might be enacted before any of us take office potentially. And I think that's the mindset we have to take when we advocate for congestion pricing.
I think one of the things that's really interesting with congestion pricing is that, I've spoken to some of the residents in downtown, and they're like, well, congestion pricing affects me as well as a resident in District 1, not just cars coming into the city, which is a lot of the misconception. And a lot of them said like, hey, I have elderly parents that I need to go visit in the Upper East Side, and I'm charged that fee. Why can't we have carve outs for residents? And, and I understand that those are the concerns, and I would advocate for carve outs for, residents, because, like that mom, that woman I spoke to, she was like, look, my mom has cancer treatment at Memorial Sloan Kettering. I need to take her. It's not like she could go on an assessor ride after treatment. And so perhaps maybe we can work out something where it's like, not for leisurely uses of your car. I'm not, still something to be worked out, but I totally understand what that woman was talking about, because she's like, I can't afford to have my mom take an Uber, and that, $12 fee is going to be, something I need to consider. But also at the same time, I feel like, having a car is a luxury. So therefore, perhaps, we need to think of, taxing the luxury that we have in using a vehicle at our convenience. So I am really open to listening to the constituents in the community, residents in the community, and hear their concerns.
I'm not sure if anyone else has noticed this, but I have noticed that since COVID, many people, many New Yorkers have decided that they are going to be car owners, right? So if you happen to, have a WhatsApp text going across with friends, or you have any Facebook groups, you may have seen people say, oh, we're purchasing a car. We purchased a car. What's the best place to park it? How do I get access to it? And unfortunately, that is the wrong way to go. I think that we have to do a massive educational campaign about why you as a New York City resident should take the responsibility to use public transportation and not rely on a car. There are certainly going to be some instances, such as where Susan mentioned, where people have to have a car, where it's not considered a luxury for them, but it is a necessity. I happen to live, very close to, a living facility where it consists of older residents, and they have access to a parking garage, which means that they have their cars. So we are going to institute congestion pricing, which I think we absolutely must, because our city needs that revenue, and we also need to decrease the amount of automobiles that we have come in and out of the district. We will have to consider carve outs. There are some people who will have to essentially, still use their automobile. But with that being said, I am hoping that we can make sure that we notify, make more residents realize the benefits of not having a car and the benefits of using public transportation and walking and biking and all the other alternatives there are in order to get around. But I think realistically, yes, I realize that there are some people who own cars and they need them for, various reasons, but they are a necessity. And I don't necessarily want to put them out because it's a necessity for them and their family. So, once people start to, take the subway more again and again, we have to express how important it is for you as a citizen to take the responsibility. You live in the city. It is, primarily walkable in a lot of instances, and you have so much access to various public transportation options. You should, feel empowered to take advantage of that and not want to be a car owner. You can live in the burbs if you want to own a car.
So I agree with Tiffany that there are certain people who use their car as a necessity. We don't need to keep going at it. People with mobility issues and people who have to be able to get somewhere where they cannot walk too fast to anywhere other than outside of their home or outside of their building. While I agree that congestion pricing will reduce the number of cars coming in, and it is not just about revenue driven, but it's also about helping to keep Lower Manhattan healthier with better quality of air, and which is what we need, right? So it's while I think we all want to have better air quality and reduce congestion, even for those who own the car, right? It would be if we have fewer cars and people can get some places faster. I'm a big public transportation person because I take the subway everywhere, and buses are a little bit more troublesome because of the congestion. So I want us to be able to take care of people who have a car as a necessity, not as a luxury.
Look, congestion pricing is not new. It's something that existed for a while. In London, we saw car traffic reduced within their area by 40%. They have special carve-outs. They have carve-outs for residents, something that we can mimic here and replicate in New York City as well. So the whole goal of congestion pricing about reducing traffic is something that will be realized. Obviously, there's a revenue aspect of it that the MTA is projected to raise an additional $1 billion. Now, the one thing that I do get concerned about outside of hopefully having carve-outs for New York City residents, so they're not getting charged every single time they're coming in and out. But moreover is how much are they going to charge our small businesses? These individuals are going to be relying on trying to rebuild themselves and actually be successful within the city. So are we going to have special carve-outs for our small businesses when they're receiving goods and services that they need in order to operate? Now, how are we going to advocate for this, an MTA as a whole, knowing that, yes, a lot of it cannot really be controlled that much on the local level. So it's not about putting pressure, but it's also using your relationships. I know in my personal history, I have worked with a number of current elected officials in the United States Senate and House. And I do have a number of friends that still work in the Biden administration. So there are people that I would absolutely utilize my own relationships in order to get these issues right in front of them and hopefully get to where they need to go in order to actually implement this change. But the one thing also, and I'm not sure it will be discussed at a later time within this forum, is we have to recognize how generous our city really has been. We have 3 million free parking spaces in New York City. That takes up so much space. That's so much stuff that can be reclaimed right back to the pedestrians to make sure we are not only kind of like fulfilling the needs that our citizens need, our citizens want, but also making sure that we are cleaner streets, that we do have less exhaust that are being ingested within our systems. There's things that we can do to just ensure health outcomes. Obviously, I mentioned super blocks because I do love the idea from the first time I read about it in a Vox.com article, seriously, in 2016. So for me, it's just we have this great opportunity. And in this election, it's going to be the most consequential since the Great Depression. So we need to have these ideas, we need to have this vision, and we need to make sure that we implement these policies to make sure that we can actually look to the future for New York City.
Can I jump in with some bread and butter transportation alternatives questions for you guys? How would you increase bike parking in your district?
So that one last, so I guess I'll start off. We need to develop the infrastructure for it. There's so many different areas in New York City that you already have these kind of bike sheds, but there's also some futuristic ones where they actually carve out these underground spaces was almost like, a conveyor belt where all of a sudden you attach your bike and it goes down and it comes back up if you hit a specific number. That type of infrastructure we can develop in the city, not everywhere, depending on what the underground looks like, obviously. But those are the type of things that I want to increase investments for, not only these bike sheds, because there are a number, I have a few friends that had their bikes ripped off, they've broken into their bike locks. So we have to ensure that people are encouraged to take other alternative methods of transportation like biking. But that's one way that I would do it, is not only increase funding for bike sheds, but also kind of this new technology as well. So make sure that these bikes are protected.
I would support having bike parking in the district because right now we don't have real bike parking other than we have very few other than the city bike that's on its own, but we see so many bikes being forced to locked around a traffic pole sign or other kind of railing that people have. So I would support having real bike racks, not just the racks on the street, but real space for the bikes, very similar to the city bike, but not a city bike rack. The other way that I have seen people do is actually maybe encourage even parking lots or parking garage owners to create a space or some sort of space for biking so that they can actually, if they want to, be able to use that and rent the space for just similar to cars renting a space for their car to park.
So I want to jump in on what Jenny had just mentioned about bike parking in garages, because my brother actually parks his bike at the garage, and it's kind of expensive. I was kind of surprised when he told me it was like $130 a month. I don't know. I mean, I guess parking your car at the garage is $800 a month. So I guess I guess that's fair market value. But my office is in the financial district. I'm in a co-work space, and right outside our building is a bike storage kind of unit. And I guess before the pandemic, the messengers would use it. And so now I see a lot of the cyclists using it themselves. And it's such a great thing to have. It doesn't take up a lot of space. And it's also, because of the way it's situated, it's not taking up sidewalk away from the pedestrian, and it's not on the streets where it's, in the motor vehicle lanes. But I want to, I saw that someone had put in the chat, like how many of the candidates are cyclists, and I know how to ride a bike, but I think the city is a little too dangerous for me to ride a bike. I'm not a strong biker. So I walk everywhere or I take the bus. So, just to answer the question from one of the attendees that put in the chat room. So thank you.
We already have.
Quick say, probably one of the easiest ways to get us more bike parking is to use some of the on-street parking spaces that we have. It will not be popular, of course, with drivers, but one parking space can essentially park between 7 to 9 bicycles, if I'm not mistaken. So that is probably one of the most quickest and efficient ways to get us more bike parking. I am a biker myself. Like many people at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, I felt a little bit more comfortable to ride a bicycle because there were less traffic on the street. So I started thin and I have kept it up, but certainly you can see the discrepancy depending on where you ride of the availability of black bike lanes and how well they're paved and just traffic that you encountered. But let's consider taking some of that on-street parking to turn it into bike parking. I think that's something that the city can do quickly and efficiently and just make it, a quicker process for everyone.
A few years ago, the city created a pilot program to allow new infrastructures to be created to allow for bike parking. One was a local business, minority owned, called Oni, that's headquartered in Brooklyn. However, the city ended the program, even though it was working. And I think we have to invest in businesses like that want to transform our streets and make sure that our bikes remain safe. The problems with cyclists now, when they go from one point to another, is that they don't want to leave their bike outside because it could get stolen. We've seen it happen almost everywhere. I'm happy to say that everyone in my campaign uses City Bike. We told all our staffers if they couldn't afford it, we would pay for it as a campaign. We're committed to cycling. We're committed to changing our culture. And we show that through our campaign.
We just have a little bit of time left, but I wanted to just get to another thing that Transportation Alternatives introduced a couple weeks ago called the 25 by 25 challenge. I don't know if you guys have heard about that, but essentially they want to see if candidates would commit to converting 25% of streets, as I interpret it, to sort of a better use, mostly for pedestrians, but also better use for trucks, and for taxis, for places to unload stuff without obstructing pedestrian thoroughfares and bike lanes. So the goal is to get there by 2025, and it does require some pretty big changes to how streets are used and how people are used to using streets in New York. And certainly in your district, the streets are incredibly precious. So would you commit to that? And would you push for that in the council?
I will commit to that. And the awesome thing is that we already have community-based plans that have been created, like the Finite Neighborhood Association created Make the Way, which will allow to pedestrianize most of the financial district, and is using these community-based models, whether it's the Seaport Coalition and how they re-envision the Seaport being 100% walkable without vehicles. I think it's committing to these plans that are already in the works and the studies that already happened, but making sure that we have a council person that on day one could implement it and not be scared to do so.
I mean, yes, I would just answer yes. I mean, that's part of my Superbox plan that I wrote back in June of last year. Obviously, I believe in converting a lot of these streets for pedestrian use only. What you've seen with a lot of the data that I mentioned and talked about earlier, but there are the scheduled deliveries as well for businesses and for drop-offs, or even for people moving into these areas. There's something that's obviously been functional, something that we've seen. So it's unquestionable that I believe that we can do 25 by 25, especially in our district. There's literally not a neighborhood within District 1 that cannot be converted into a super block, or parts of it can be converted to a super block. And when you walk around on Lower East Side, in my neighborhood, I live in Olita, Soho, Financial District, whatever it may be, we see it all. We see all these areas where the car traffic, we literally can relegate them to the major thoroughways, and it will be far more successful in increasing it. And I've spoken to business owners, especially on the Lower East Side, where they've been excited about what I'm actually trying to do. They know that this type of plan can not only increase business activity for them, but they'll be able to hire more people and also pay higher wages. There's so many benefits that come from such a simple policy implementation, but also just having the will and not be afraid. And I know there's going to be some pushback from it, but that's okay. I'll tell you right now, we are looking out for the betterment of the entire society and the city itself. And Superbox is one way that we'll get there, and it'll be maybe, it'll definitely match up with 25 by 25, as it already has. And I think we can do more than that too.
I just want to mention that as a mom of two little ones, I am always looking for outdoor space that we can utilize and benefit. The community in which I live in, the financial district, as you mentioned earlier, Stephen, it has some of the most narrow streets. And so oftentimes I am trying to juggle making sure my two little ones are safe as we're moving back and forth across our community and our neighborhood. So I think that, yes, I can certainly commit to by 2025, we are using more of our, space for, more smartly for people, for those designated pick off and drop off areas. I think that it will just make it less congested for everyone. And when there is a plan in place that people can recognize, that will those solutions will help make it easier overall for the entire community. So that's something that I certainly can support. I think it will certainly benefit families. I think our seniors who are aging in place within our city, it will benefit them as well. So I am hopeful that we can implement this by 2025 for sure.
So yeah, I do support 20 by 25. And I spent a lot of time in Hong Kong, and it's a very congested city. And they do have, you know, neck downs where the sidewalk is pushed out a little bit so that pedestrians can cross the street. I mean, those are some of the elements of the 25 by 25 that, you know, designated drop-off zones for taxis, for Ubers. Like they do that in other cities where they alleviate the congestion or, you know, pedestrian safety. You know, down the block from where I live, there is a Fresh Direct, I think, truck that offloads and takes their groceries to the neighbors in the neighborhood. And I think that's a really good idea, because instead of driving that big truck around and causing all this pollution and, you know, pollution and potential accidents, they're stopped at one spot, designated spot, and then they do their drop-offs. And so I think it's a really good idea. And, you know, opening up space is really important. You know, I walk by the Odeon a lot, and they have a bench outside their restaurant, and I thought that was like really creative to just kind of have a place to sit and talk to your neighbors, or, you know, while you're waiting for your reservation at the restaurant. So I do support the 25 by 25 because I've seen it done in other cities and it's been effective.
So I'm all for having a well-balanced infrastructure that is well thought out. While there is a lot more work that we can do, but totally support that we need to have a vast network or protected bike lane, not just bike lane, not sharing the road, but protected bike lane, so that we protect the bikers and also the people who are driving as well. More green space and more walkable space is something that it's totally what I would like to do, because I am someone who walk around the city a lot. But I would want us to really think through how a well-balanced plan would be and what we need to do to make sure that we are protecting people's safety first.
And obviously I'm a reporter, so I like to ask fun, uncomfortable questions. Let me throw a third rail New York City question at you. Would you guys support residential parking permits? Something that's been discussed, not quite seriously yet, but you know, I certainly hear a lot of folks talking about it.
I would definitely. It's another, I mean, there's all these free parking space that the city can, you know, issue these residential parking permits to generate income, revenue for the city. I mean, we're heading, you know, our budget is suffering, and we need to find new revenue streams. And I think this is one of the really good ways of doing it, is to have residential parking permits. And like I said before, you know, having a car is, you know, it's a convenience factor. So if you either park it in a garage and pay for a garage fee, or you park it on the street and pay, you know, residential parking permit, and they do it in other cities. So I really think it is another revenue stream that is important for the city.
No, the answer is no. When I lived in DC, we had residential parking. And what I saw was a lot of punitive fees that were disproportionately really affecting the Black and brown communities within the city itself. That is something that will continue to happen unless we make sure that we put our foot down and stop this from happening. So the answer is no, I do not support it, because I know that it will disproportionately affect working class communities, and I want to make sure that does not happen. And I feel like we don't really need it. Is there a better utilization of the 3 million free parking spaces? Yes, and we discussed that earlier, by either bike sheds, super blocks, et cetera, whatever it may be. But no, I do not, absolutely will never support residential parking.
You know, it's an interesting question, Stephen. We've been talking about how to reduce the number of cars, right? And we talk about how how we encourage people to use public transportation. So now we're going to talk about having residential permits. It's to me is a little bit contradictory, but I would support those who have who use car as a necessity to have them. So it's not a wholesale, everybody who has a car will get a residential permit. That's what we're looking to, if we're looking to reduce the number of cars, then why do we encourage people to have cars and by having residential permits?
When it comes to residential parking permits, I think what my concern is that we will once again see those with the most resources rising to the top of it. We would see the ones who are able to, quickly request access to that. Oftentimes that's a digital process, as we've learned with the COVID-19 vaccine. They will rise to the top and they will see those immediate benefits. And then there will be people who do not have the access, who will be, hindered by having to acquire that permit, by having to pay any fines associated if they're not parked in the proper place with their permit. I mean, it's certainly something that we can look into, get the community impact feedback and input, but to completely commit to it without having a lot of the pros and cons at the moment hashed out is something that I would be hesitant to do. I know it was mentioned that other cities do it. Denny mentioned DC, they do it as well in Boston. And so there have been some downfalls related to that, but just speaking of, additional benefits to the community, I know that there was a comment, someone mentioned, one of the attendees mentioned, Governor's Island, and we haven't talked a lot about that here, but I know Governor's Island for me is, an extension of our neighborhood. I mentioned earlier that I have two small ones. And as we were dealing with COVID, we were so excited when Governor's Island opened back up because we were able to go to a car-free space. My daughter just learned to ride her bicycle this summer, and we were able to take her bicycle there and help her, master it even more and not have to worry about for her to look around for cars. So I am hopeful that Governor's Island and any other space, outdoor space that New Yorkers have grown accustomed to, that they can freely and openly go to and not have to worry about congestion and cars and, the health concerns that are related to cars, that they continue to be free and open to the public. I think each of us have realized the importance of outdoor space during this time of COVID. We live in New York City apartments and you can only get, so much space. So I really value that outdoor space that we have in Governor's Island and other places as well.
I do believe it's going to create a class divide. I think it is a smart idea, but I think there should be subsidies for people who don't make enough money to probably pay for these permits. And we have to make sure that any fund that's generated from these permits go back to the MTA to improve our subway system, to improve our buses, and not just for the mayor or the governor to use at free will for all their pet projects. One small example about this class divide is our parking lot that's local on Exit Street. Once they digitalize it, many of the Latino, Asian American communities couldn't apply to it. My dad worked for Delancey Car Service. He didn't know how to get online to apply for it. And then once they raised the rent to $300 a month, many of him and his colleagues could not afford to do that. And so it created a class divide of even who could do that type of job in this neighborhood. And so we have to keep that in mind whenever we decide to add these residential permits.
I'm just going to correct Christopher there. I think you have a misunderstanding with the residential parking permits. If you live in a residency like you do in Boston or DC, you already get a parking permit. You just have to apply for it. You don't have to pay anything for it. I know I didn't have to pay when I had a parking permit in DC, but what often happens is, you're right, where the divide actually comes from where they actually fine individuals, where they focus on the fines and the implementation of trying to raise those fees. They focus on working class communities rather than the wealthy ones. So that's when you travel to these areas, you'll see a lot of these parking cops, park only, especially in DC. When you travel in DC, you'll see that they have these parking only cops that really are just looking to find cars, and they're always located in the Black and brown communities. They're not actually focusing in some of the higher income areas. So it's not paying a fee to get the permit. You actually get a permit as long as you're registered in a particular address. The fines actually come after the fact. That's where they start gouging you.
I think it depends by city, because London, you have to apply for the permit to have residential parking.
That's fair.
Well, New York could create its own system as well.
True.
Great. Well, I think we need to end it there, but it's been a pleasure for me to hear all of your different thoughts and opinions, and to meet all of you as well. And certainly whoever wins, I look forward to covering you. I'm calling your office many times for comments. Cool. So I don't know how Transportation Alternatives wants to close you guys out, or if you guys just want to say farewell, goodbye, and then we'll move to the next group.
Thank you for hosting this, and I look to partner with you, not just in this campaign, but also in the council office. So thank you all.
Thank you for inviting me to this forum. It's really good to speak with you guys and also to hear what my fellow candidates have to say about, you know, what's going on in the city in terms of transportation accessibility. Thank you.
Everyone, have a great evening. Thanks again.
Thank you again, Transportation Alternatives, for this. I am happy that my Superbox plan actually coincides with the release of your 25 by 25 plan that you released earlier this month. Moreover, I know the one thing that we didn't really discuss too much is also increasing infrastructure within our subway systems to better ventilate the area. One of the most recent articles that just got released by The Guardian, it was a study by NYU, is that they found that the particulate matter was 70 times greater than what's considered safe in Christopher Street subway, but also heightened areas all over the city. So we need to increase infrastructure to better the ventilation system, so then our citizens will be more welcome and feel safer when they travel using our public transportation systems as well. So I just want to mention that as well, because I know that's very important. But again, thank you, everybody. Really appreciate your time. I hope you have a wonderful night.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you for having me. Have a good night.
Thank you, Jenny. I guess CD1, if you guys just want to log off, you can go back to your life, or you can listen. Up to you.
Thank you, everyone. We will move forward with Council District 3. We do have Erik and Marni on right now, and Leslie will be joining us at 7:30. But if we could start, and we can begin with introductions. And Stephen, if you'd like to also introduce yourself again, I will provide the names of all the candidates who are joining us in the chats below.
Well, hello. I'm Stephen Nesson. As you may or may not know, I cover transportation for WNYC Radio and for Gothamist, the website. It's the same organization. And it's great to have both of you here. We had several more candidates from District 1. And I don't know if you're watching, but I will try to ask you guys some different questions to make it interesting for me and surprising for you. But do you guys want to introduce yourselves? I guess maybe Marta.
Sure. Oh, you want me to go first? Okay. My name is Marni Halasa. I am a community activist. I'm a lawyer. I am a figure skating coach. I'm running for City Council in District 3. And most of my advocacy, I feel, centers upon really helping disadvantaged communities, people of color. I was part of a movement in my district to stop the demolition of 2 NYCHA buildings at Fulton houses. So I'm very proud of that. And I'm still working with the tenants to stop privatization. And also, I've also been an advocate of legislation in City Council called the Small Business Jobs Survival Act, which would give us all small business owners an affordable and renewable lease. City Council actually had the opportunity. They gave it a public hearing in 2018, but Speaker Corey Johnson, promised that he was going to pass it, tweak it, and then pass it, and that never happened. And I'm still pushing. Also, I'm trying to push for the homelessness in our district to get permanent housing with supportive services in the building. So that's really much of my advocacy. And in terms of transportation, what I would like to do is really bring a lot of people that I talk to. They say that there's no, obviously, we need to sort of take back our city for pedestrians. I think voters in my community are talking about bringing back, like having more green spaces, having pedestrians to be able to, walk around the district and, not be afraid to cross the street because of the congestion of cars. But also because they also talk about regulation, a little bit more regulation with the bikes, because they're worried that a lot of the delivery bikes are going in many different directions. But I'm also about expanding the bike infrastructure in the outer boroughs so communities of color actually have access to bikes, because it's such a low cost of transportation. But also in general, I'm advocating for the community to have final say in land use decisions, just to bring back so the community can really, take back our city. So that's what I'm about.
Thank you. Erik?
Hi, Stephen. Thank you for hosting tonight. Thank you for Transportation Alternatives for hosting tonight. My name is Erik Bottcher. I'm running for City Council in District 3. For the last 6 years, I've been District 3 Chief of Staff to Speaker Corey Johnson. And I came to New York 20 years ago from a small town in the Adirondack Mountains. And here in New York, I found community. I found myself like so many other people over the generations. And I dedicated myself to giving back, working at the City Council as the LGBTQ liaison in the Community Outreach Unit, working for the governor in 2011 as the LGBT liaison, working to pass marriage equality in New York State. And then, of course, for the last 6 years as Chief of Staff to Corey here in the district. And I'm so proud of what we've been able to accomplish together here in the district to make our streets safer. New protected bike lanes on 5th Avenue, 6th Avenue, 7th Avenue, 11th Avenue, 8th Avenue in front of the Port Authority. Crosstown protected bike lanes in the teens, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. We planted over 500 trees, street trees throughout the district, which are shown to slow the speed of traffic. And pedestrian improvements throughout the district. On 7th Avenue South, big improvements if you've walked on 7th Avenue South, which still is a very problematic stretch, but it was much worse before. And of course, the busway on 14th Street, which has just been a big success. But we've got much more work to do. And this June, we're going to be electing a whole new city government, a new mayor, borough president, district attorney, comptroller. 35 of the 51 council members are going to be new. And we have a big opportunity in front of us. And I believe that we have an opportunity to achieve a city where we don't have to live among honking cars and breathe exhaust fumes and navigate dangerous intersections. We've always lived that way and we've always been used to it. But people are waking up to the fact that we don't have to live that way. That's not the world we have to live in. We can sleep with our windows open on a spring night without having to be woken up by trucks and cars. So I'm looking forward to tonight's conversation, and I'm looking forward to the next phase in the history of New York City and working with all of you to be part of that.
Thank you, Erik. So I just want to start with some sort of district specific questions for both of you. You mentioned the busway on 14th Street. It seems like both of you are supportive of that. So I assume you would want to replicate it. Where specifically would you want another busway in your district?
Well, we could have one on 34th Street. I live on 34th Street between 9th and 10th Avenue. And I mean, this neighborhood, I mean, been here for like 28 years. It is so radically changed. I mean, people who used to live in my building, they left because, you know, because of the construction, because of Hudson Yards, you know, I mean, just the tremendous amount of construction just makes the neighborhood, like, honestly, almost like unlivable. There have been times when I've actually, you know, me and a couple people in our building, we've actually gone out in our pajamas to make sure that people who are jackhammering at night at like 11:30 at night actually do have a permit. And, you know, sometimes they don't. We have a block association, the Hell's Kitchen Block Association that's run by people in my building. But I mean, 34th Street, there could definitely be something like that. But just in general, the tremendous amount of gentrification in the district, I think is something that has really made our district, the residents I know here really complain about it. That's why, again, I'm advocating for the community to have final control, final say in land use decisions. If the community does not want it, it should not have it. So.
I am excited by the prospect of a car-free 42nd Street. 42nd Street has always been a nightmare trying to get east to west, and there's been proposals over the years for light rail on 42nd Street. But we know that buses are significantly less expensive than rail, and they're a way of moving large amounts of people quickly. But like with any changes, it's really something that as a community, we need to come together and discuss it and have visioning sessions. And maybe there is another street that's better for it, but let's come together as a community and make those decisions together.
Do either of you think Broadway should be fully pedestrianized from Central Park to Union Square?
I do.
Yeah, I do too. Actually, that would really, yeah. That would definitely make our city more livable.
Let's do it. All right. Well, just getting more back down to the street level, you know, there's been a lot of talk about how to deal with garbage. Some people refer to New York as trash city at this point. Especially after all the snowstorms and the trash piling up. Yeah. Do you think garbage should be removed from the sidewalk and placed in curbside receptacles? I think Catherine Garcia has pushed for something like this. Would either of you support anything like that?
Yes, I would support that. Yeah, it's interesting. If you walk in Chelsea doesn't have that much trash. It's interesting when you walk in Hell's Kitchen, it is so filthy dirty. So, I mean, I wonder why there's that discrepancy, but Hell's Kitchen is like, you know, Cinderella's like, you know, ugly stepsister. I mean, you know, so, you know, obviously it's different too. It's more dense. The streets are smaller, you know, so it's a little bit different, but it just seems that, you know, when the budget happened, I think 106 million was cut from the sanitation department. You know, maybe that wasn't such the best decision, but it just seems that there's other ways to cut the budget and not cut something like sanitation. So
I agree with Marni about the problems that the cut caused. But I put in the chat a link to my sanitation plan that I released a couple months ago now. And in it, I talk about the need to get trash off the sidewalks. Yet another thing that we're just used to. We're used to on trash collection nights walking amongst mountains of garbage. And that's not something that they do in other cities. In many cities like Barcelona, they containerize the trash in the street bed. And we really need to pick up the pace on piloting these programs. I believe it's being piloted in some of the bids and just a little bit in some residential neighborhoods. But the DOT and the Department of Sanitation really had to be pushed to do it. Czech Peds and Christine Berthet and Hanna Wadowski and others right in our district, they just went ahead and one day last winter, actually it was last summer, they just went ahead and did it and made a corral in the street and put the trash in it. And the DOT was not happy, but shortly thereafter, they began piloting the program. And, you know, it's time to really think out of the box. Another proposal I put in there that relates to transportation is the piloting of pneumatic tube technology. We're thinking decades out, but there are cities, there's a city in South Korea where the trash on the street corner, it goes down into the ground and it gets sucked into a tube to a central location. Take the trucks off the street. This is visionary stuff, but we should start thinking about really visionary things. I want to pilot that pneumatic tube technology under the High Line. There's a group that's been advocating for that for a few years now, and the city wouldn't sign off on it. But we could pilot that under the High Line so businesses and residences between the village and Moynihan Station could use it, and it would bring the trash to a central location so we don't have to have the trucks on our streets all the time. More things that we have to think differently about.
Just to pivot a little bit back to transportation specific, Vision Zero, as both of you know, of course, has proven effective, although recently maybe backsliding a little bit. But many advocates and council members say, you know, the next step for Vision Zero is really to scale it up, to be more aggressive, to get to, you know, zero, you know, crash deaths. So I'm curious, how would either of you scale it up and, you know, do more to get towards the Vision Zero goal?
Well, there needs to be a lot more enforcement. I mean, it just seems that, I mean, on 34th Street, I live 34th Street in Dyer, and there are still cars running red lights like all the time. You know, so it just seems that, you know, and also like just the other day when I was petitioning, there was somebody on their motorcycle, like going in the opposite direction on the sidewalk, and nothing ever happens. There's like no enforcement. So it's like, it's great to have all these rules and like, you know, it all sounds great and that there's a plan, but if there's no enforcement, it means nothing. You know, it's like all the landlord harassment and, you know, I mean, it all sounds great, but if there's no enforcement, it's, you know, it's sort of like, you know, this conversation is a little bit irrelevant. So, you know, it's interesting. I talked to the seniors in Penn South and they're just like, you know, they're seniors. And so they have walkers, they're in wheelchairs and they're not mobile. They can't move out of the way. So, I mean, I was just thinking like, why can't we have like, you know, a public safety officer, you know, somebody that does not have a gun, but a public safety officer on some of these, you know, very highly traveled intersections and, you know, to sort of regulate the cars, make sure the pedestrians are safe, make sure that, you know, the delivery guys with bikes aren't like going, you know, in all different directions. I mean, it just seems like enforcement is like a really important part of this that I don't really see.
Marni's exactly right about enforcement, and I'll just break off a couple pieces of that. Brad Hoylman has a bill that would permit speed cameras to operate at night and in more locations, and I support that because one thing we've seen over the last year is we've seen more and more street racing. During the pandemic, when there were very few cars on the road, especially at night, some people exploited that and are continuing to, and it's very dangerous. we're really lucky that more people haven't been killed doing it. But let's use this technology, speed camera technology, and catch these folks. So I support that state legislation. I also will co-sponsor a strengthening of the Reckless Driver Accountability Act, which suspends the licenses of people with a certain amount of speeding violations in a year. And when they passed the bill, they passed it with a very high number of violations that it would take to trigger that bill, to trigger that penalty. So I'll sponsor legislation lowering the amount, and I'll fight for funding to actually enforce the law, because the Department of Transportation hasn't even funded the unit that will need to administer that law. So those are just a couple of the things that we need to do to make Vision Zero more successful.
Can I say just one thing? I feel like a public safety officer. I mean, I don't know, speed cameras, you know, to me, it feels like surveillance a little bit. But I mean, if you put an officer on the corner, I'm telling you, I mean, the whole behavior would change. And that's just like one person. If people know that, okay, if I go here, there's going to be people, you know, there's going to be, you know, a safety officer watching. And in addition, you know, there's a consequence of getting a ticket. I think that would really help. So.
Cool. Just pause for 1 second. Welcome our final panelist candidate. Leslie, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. I'm sorry when this was switched last minute. I already had a Zoom previous, so I jumped off there a little early and I switched over here. But thank you for having me on. I don't want to disrupt. I will jump in. I don't want to take anyone else's time. I know you guys have been here for a little bit, so I apologize.
No worries.
Hi, Erik. Hi, Marni.
Hi.
Just to sort of jump back to where we were, both Marni and Erik were talking about increased enforcement to reduce sort of traffic, you know, mess, infractions, crashes, etc. But it sounds like, Marni, you're talking about a safety officer. I don't know, would you, both of you or all three of you, support, do you think the NYPD should be removed from traffic enforcement, or not?
I do, largely. There's also been a lack of real investigation in the wake of accidents. That's been problematic. When there's been accidents, it's so important to very quickly investigate and come up with all the details and very quickly make any changes that are needed. You know, sadly, we too often make changes after the fact, after someone's been hurt or even killed. But when there is an accident, the NYPD hasn't always been the best about investigating them. So let's have a Department of Transportation unit that does a forensic investigation about what happened and what needs to change.
I agree with that. Actually, I feel like there should be a new, like a public safety department that's completely independent from the NYPD. We could have a Department of Transportation unit. Also, homeless outreach, where it's handled by people that are professionals, but something that is completely independent from the NYPD.
I guess I'll jump in now that I'm here, right? That's okay. You were talking about enforcement of traffic situations, Stephen. Is that what? So I don't know if it was brought up. It might have been already. I'm a very, very, very big proponent of speed cameras. I think they kill about 1 million birds with one stone. I like the idea because they work well on so many different levels. I think they're accurate. I think they work. I think they can be installed in just about anywhere. another bird, I think they're a good deterrent. I think when you get that ticket in the mail and you look at where that picture was taken, you remember, and you're more careful this time, the next time. I am not talking from personal experience at all. I am just saying that I know when someone gets a ticket, it's a deterrent. And then I think it speaks to your larger issue of police patrolling traffic. I think it takes the biasness out of policing, and quite frankly, the policing out of policing. When you speed, you get caught and you get a ticket in the mail, right? The computer doesn't know who's driving the car. They don't know, who's behind the wheel or who's, they just see the license plate. There's no biasness. You're not, a cop's not doing a pullover traffic stop because someone looks the wrong way or the car looks a little different. So I think that there are many times there's definitely racial profiling in traffic stops. So I think not only does this help speeding or curb speeding, but I think it also fines violators, but it also is one little step into limiting that daily police interaction.
Just to touch on something a few candidates have mentioned, in addition to bikes, the city has a growing population of other sort of micro mobility options, scooters, e-scooters, and as you know, e-scooter shares are chomping at the bit to get into Manhattan. I don't quite know exactly where the status of a pilot is, but something's supposed to be happening soon. How will you guys balance the micro mobility needs of the city going forward?
So I support the piloting of new options. I think technology provides an opportunity to ensure better safety. GPS technology is getting highly advanced. I had a call a couple months ago with a company based in Dublin that was showing me some extremely impressive technology that could be used with scooters to prevent them from going places they shouldn't go and docking places they shouldn't dock. Let's look at what's happening elsewhere, what's happening around the world, what's working, what's not working, and let's pilot it in a thoughtful and safe way.
Oh, I was going to say, I agree with that also. I mean, I have colleagues and friends that are now riding the scooter, and they're going really fast. So that's a whole nother thing too. We have to really make sure that where they travel, it's not going to interfere with pedestrians or the bikes. And obviously it's best to see what's working in other cities, but definitely scooters are really popular. I wonder if the scooters could be also in the bike lanes. I wonder how that would all work, but definitely a pilot program.
Yeah, I think there has to be really thoughtful, careful study and urban planning on this. Where are the scooters going? Are they going in the regular lanes in the streets, or are they going in the bike lanes? Is there now a separate scooter? There are a lot of moving parts here, and we have to be careful. And actually, this is one of the reasons why I'm running. I think there are a lot of knee-jerk plans that are being made. Let's do this, let's do that. And then 2 years, 5 years, 10 years down the road, we're like, oh gosh, look at these unintended consequences we're getting into here. So I like having thoughtful and deliberate planning. And when it comes to e-scooters, e-bikes, micro transportation here, I actually would like to start with e-cargo bikes. I mean, I think that would be a really good place to start instead of having everyone just getting on a scooter and going here. Let's start it where we need it. And again, let's kill a few birds with one stone here. If we do e-cargo bikes, then, listen, pre-COVID, how many packages were being delivered in New York City? Like 1.5 million. I mean, that surged, and we have no e-commerce infrastructure. I just read recently, I think it was the other day, Amazon added 9 warehouses around the city. Okay, but we need we have to concentrate on last leg delivery. And I think that's where these e-cargo bikes, these e-scooters can really be a benefit to urban delivery. We have one actually in our district. I believe Amazon has just taken over, or just a few months ago, taken over the Cadillac dealership on 11th Avenue for its last leg delivery. Genius, right? We don't need all these FedEx trucks just standing in the middle of the avenue, and then there's packages all over the place and who knows where they're going. If we have a lot of these open storefronts, we encourage these Amazons, the FedExes, the bigger delivery people to rent out these storefronts, and it could be used as a hub for last leg delivery. And that's where the micro, transportation, the e-cargo bikes and the e-scooters, I think that's where we should start. And I apologize if I got into a whole other riff there about e-commerce, but I think they're closely intertwined.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to pivot a little bit to the Open Streets program, which has proven, depending on your opinion, pretty popular, I think, with most people during the pandemic. As candidates, as council members, would you seek to expand Open Streets and make it permanent, maybe year round?
I mean, for me, if the community wants it, then I think we should, instead of just like the mayor just making something permanent, if the community wants it, then I think we should do it. But I think it should be left up to the community.
I'm a big fan of the Open Streets program, and I agree with Marni that go to the local residents, get a sense of, is it something that they would like? Is it something that works for this block? And most of the blocks that have open streets are very happy with it. There were some open streets that worked great, some that didn't work so great, but I think it's a great program. It's one of the very few positive things to come out of the last year, and I think we should expand it.
I'm gonna agree with my colleagues, but partially. But I do think it should be heavy community input. I know I'm on community board 4, and it was interesting. We saw some blocks vote it down. They did not want it for their blocks. And we definitely saw there was specific age ranges that kind of, you can tell, you can see some of the trends of how they voted, whether they would want an open street for their block or not. But then we have another one a few blocks down, and their block loves it. So I think it has to be heavy, community input, and even block by block. I mean, we're very lucky in our district. We have very, very strong block associations. So I think we can actually get micro with that and go to our block associations. Because like I said, some said, no, thank you. We voted on it, we discussed it. And some said, yep, let's go. So I think we have to have heavy community input at that block association level.
And I see on the chat, I'm getting a question someone else asked earlier, but I didn't get a chance to raise it. And I did listen to one of the mayoral forums, and at least one of the candidates advocated for a car-free Manhattan. What do you three think about that?
Yeah, I actually saw that. I saw that. It was actually very, very interesting. I mean, I think cars and congestion can be regulated, and I think we're already moving towards congestion pricing. We're already moving towards, pedestrians and bikes, and sort of taking back our city. I mean, that's already going in that direction, which I think is a good thing. I think people, though, some people do need their cars. Some people need to travel for work. Some people, have to take their elderly, parent to the doctors, and they don't have the money to always take, carless. I mean, that would mean, I just think that there are certain situations where you have to have a car. But I think it's a very interesting idea, and I do think we are moving into a realm it's very, very interesting, but a realm where pedestrians and, different forms of transportations and not cars are kind of becoming more of the norm. So it's going to be interesting, but I do think people still need their cars for work.
So Stephen, I'm actually a big environmentalist. It's one of the major pieces of my platform. And the trend is, and people were laughing at me about 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, I said, I want public charging stations in Manhattan. Everyone's like, yeah, public charging stations, And guess what? A few weeks ago, President Biden said he's rolling out 500,000 public charging stations to the big cities mostly. So I think that environmentally and what the world is going towards, it's not necessarily vehicle free, but it's carbon friendly. It's carbon neutral. That's what the trend is going to. GM just announced a little while ago that I think it's 10 years, I can get my years straight. They're going to now just all electric, not one gas car are they going to produce. This is GM. Not one gas guzzler, all electric. So I think the trends that we're seeing is actually not necessarily less cars, but more environmentally friendly cars. Not saying that it can't happen where we reduce it. I'm a big, public transportation person too. Pre-COVID, I took the bus and the subway every day, 4 times a day. But I do think that the trends are going into environmentally friendly options.
I envision a future without non-essential car travel. And I actually think that, if you need a car because you're a wheelchair user, or you need it to, or you're a plumber or something like that, this is something that I think should appeal to you, because people who need an automobile for an essential purpose are stuck in traffic because of all the non-essential car travel. You look at the people coming out of the Lincoln Tunnel into Manhattan, there's one person behind the wheel of every car. And most of them are choosing to come in. So I that's a future that I can envision.
Just to switch things up a little bit, for another somewhat transit related topic in your districts. Before Cuomo was recently embroiled in everything that's happening now, he did set out a pretty ambitious agenda to remake Midtown, the Penn South project. A lot of that was dependent and is dependent on federal money and aid. And a lot of it is obviously very much, at the federal and state level, but down at the district level, how much would you endorse some of that redevelopment? And how would you exert influence to, represent your constituents in that project?
Community Board 4 and Community Board 5 both submitted extremely detailed and thoughtful feedback on that plan, and folks should check that out who are interested in learning more about it. I think that there are opportunities for tremendous improvements to that vital transit hub. I do support moving Madison Square Garden off of its current location. It's one of the great really crimes against the public sphere is what happened there. And I did a walking tour of the station with the land use chair of Community Board 5. And, the ceiling height on that Long Island Railroad portion is, I'm 6'3", and it's like 6'3.5". That's because of Madison Square Garden. You're not going to increase that ceiling height as long as it's there. So we really need to think of creative ways through this process with the community at the table to improve that station because it's just horrible the way it is.
I think Erik is trying to say Patrick Ewing's not coming downstairs and taking the from the Georgetown game the other night from MSG.
Who doesn't know who Patrick Ewing is? My
Who
God.
doesn't know that? Yeah, that was crazy, right? Anyway,
Anyone under the age of 25, I guess.
yeah. But I do agree with Erik on certain points as well. And this is where it's very interesting. Our district and whoever the next city council person is going to be a part of some very, very, very important projects, whether that is the affordable housing projects on DEP MTA sites, whether that's the project you're talking about throughout sharing with Midtown, you know, whether it's the NYCHA rebuilds, a lot. So I think that, as Erik said, I am on Community Board 4. So yes, there were some submitted, you know, ideas and plans along with Community Board 5, and that just shows what great community participation and thoughtfulness is going into that. And I think that we should stress and look at that, or the next city council person should look at that very carefully. But I think this is where political will comes in, Stephen. I think this is not where I have an idea for this or I have a philosophy about this. This is where you need muscle. This is where the city council person has to go in there and sharpen their elbows and say, this is my district. This is what my district needs, you know, and be a voice of the residents and the businesses there. And I think that's an extremely important point that might escape some people, because a lot of people are concentrating on the philosophy, or you know, we should do this or we should do that. It's going to be it's going to be an interesting back and forth in the next few years. And I think the city council person should be ready, and they should be ready to fight for their district on this one.
So I have a different perspective. I guess this gateway, I mean, to justify 4 humongous office towers, and essentially 2 would be taller than the Empire State Building. I mean, does our district actually need, with all the empty space and all the empty office buildings, I mean, do we really need 4 new office towers? And then also, you know, to create sort of another Hudson Yards at Penn Station, I mean, they would probably demolish the Pennsylvania Hotel, Manhattan Mall, the old Gimbel's building, and probably others. I mean, a lot of these sorts of like, you know, huge sort of like gentrification projects, it also entails a lot of demolition, which then displaces, you know, small businesses. And I just see this as a huge monstrosity, another gentrification project. I mean, when I feel like our district and our neighborhoods need, you know, they need other things. They need, the homeless need to be housed. Small businesses are dying. I mean, why are we focusing our efforts on that? We should be, you know, trying to help small businesses. You know, this is gentrification. And I feel like this is what Corey Johnson and his predecessors have really done with our district. It's gentrification, it's austerity, and it's bad. It's bad government policy that's bad for the district. And that's my position on that.
All right.
Silence.
No. All right. Well, I think we just have time for maybe one more question, which also divided our last group, but let's see how you guys feel about it. Do you think that the city should introduce residential parking permits and maybe end free street parking?
I'm open to a pilot on that. I think, I believe that Community Board 7 was about to pilot that program before this crisis. I think we should pilot it quickly. The details are important, but I'm open to it. I think it's what you don't want is people driving around with an expectation of parking. Now that they have a permit, they're driving around and around looking for parking. But I think it's an idea that New York City should pilot right away.
I'm actually for this idea. Again, I do want to, I'm a big unintended consequences person. I do like to dot all my I's and cross all my T's and look at the fine print. But it does work in other cities. Actually, some of the complaints in other cities that the fees are too low. They're very small fees. I think it would also generate income from the city on a steady basis if the fees, the appropriation was if it was appropriate. And I actually think that it prevents people from endlessly circling to look for. I think that's what they do now. They circle looking for parking. They're, and it's just driving round and round and round. And if you have a permit and and you pay your fee, then I think you're able, you can have somewhat of an expectation, maybe not, as we move forward and, as we see more bike parking and as we see maybe more outdoor dining, those areas will shrink naturally. It'll evolve that way. But yeah, I mean, and it also ends this absurd practice that I don't do it, but I see people in one's car idling, waiting for alternate side to be over. I mean, that is a disaster on its own, right? But so anyway, I would want to see more data to ensure that the same issue with congestion pricing doesn't arise here, like they don't overlap in a bad way. But I do suspect it would be a largely different circumstance because the economic status of individuals who keep a car in Manhattan versus those who drive in and out for work on a routine basis is likely to be a little different.
Yes, I agree with a lot of what Leslie just said. I think the city is already going to have congestion pricing. So I think if people have a residential permit and they pay for it, and yeah, if the fees are too low, make them higher so the city can really benefit from that. But also the fact that a lot of the bikes, they're experimenting with a lot of dockless bikes. So I know like now you see City Bike has those like huge docks. One of the problems also is that Lyft actually controls that when actually the city should probably control that. And then what you would see is that the docking stations wouldn't be in all the sort of like white wealthy neighborhoods like Chelsea and Hell's Kitchen. If the city was in control of that, it probably would have been more equitably redistributed all over the city. But if they are experimenting with dockless bikes, then if they start to remove all of those docks, that frees up a lot of space. So I mean, I would support residential permits.
Okay. Well, I think it's a good moment to end it at. I appreciate everyone's thoughts and opinions. And as I told the last group, I look forward to whoever wins covering you and calling your office repeatedly for comment and whatnot. Does everyone just want to say goodbye? And also, I forgot to mention in the last group, we had Gigi Lee, who was supposed to be here, but she couldn't make it for a health emergency or something. So anyways, I will say goodbye and I'll let you guys say goodbye. And then maybe Susan wants to end it as well.
Thank you, Stephen. You did a great job.
Thank you, guys. I'm sorry for being late. I had a previous conflict when the time was moved. I apologize profusely.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity, Stephen.
I'm sure this is going to come up as we get further into the race too, more and more of these discussions on transportation.
It's interesting because I really, it's interesting. It's great to participate, but also I learned from everybody, so it's a very worthwhile a worthwhile thing to do is to hear what everybody's saying. It's great.
Well, that is good to hear. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. And thank you, Stephen, for moderating. Hopefully, if we do do more forums in the future, you're all obviously invited to join us. But we wish you a wonderful rest of your night. And for everyone who is tuning in, thank you so much for watching. And we will have the recording on our YouTube channel. So have a great night, everyone.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Stephen.
you.
Thank you.